This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 and pursuant to code 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. With that being said, I'll go ahead and call the January 4th meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee to order. Leah, could you go ahead and do the roll call?
I'll be glad to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, TAC members. I'm Leah Vigil, the Administrative Assistant for Fampo, and I will be taking roll call. At this time, you may unmute your mics. I'll be calling both primary and alternate members for attendance purposes. Should you encounter technical or volume issues, you may type your name into the chat box for our records. Chair Osiak has called the meeting to order and his attendance has been noted. Please indicate your presence by saying here when your name is called. I'll continue with localities, but beginning with Stafford County. Mr. Brian Council. Mr. Jason Towery.
Here.
Thank you. For Spotsylvania County, First Vice Chair, Mr. Paul Agnello.
Here.
Mr. Rodney White.
Here.
Mr. Jacob Pastwick. Mr. Leon Hughes. For the City of Fredericksburg, Second Vice Chair, Eric Nelson. Mr. Bassam Amin.
Here.
Thank you. For VDOT, Ms. Michelle Shropshire.
Here.
Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Jim Ponticello. Mr. Dan Grinnell. For Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, Dr. Robert Schneider. Mr. Joseph Staines.
Here.
Thank you. For Caroline County, Mr. Mike Fincham. Mr. Craig Pennington.
Here.
Thank you. King George County, Mr. Nick Miner.
Here.
Ms. Kimberly Wilson. For GW Ride Connect, Ms. Kate Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Linda Millsap. Ms. Lee Anderson.
Here.
For the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit, Ms. Sierra Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Todd Horsley. For Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Ivan Rucker. For Virginia Railway Express, Ms. Sonali Soneji.
Here.
Ms. Christine Hefner. And for Fredericksburg Regional Transit, Ms. Jamie Jackson.
Here.
Thank you. And Mr. Aiden Quirk. Roll call has been taken and a quorum is present. Please put your mics back on mute unless recognized by the chairman to speak. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Leah. All right.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Bob Schneider with OmniRide. I had to switch from computer to phone. I couldn't get it to work. Sorry about that.
No problem. I think, Leah, you got Bob?
And this is Ian Ollis from Fampo. Also, please record me. I think I joined just after you got to my name on the list.
I've got you both. Thank you.
All right, so moving on to item number 3, which is approval of today's agenda. Does anyone have any additions or deletions they'd like to recommend for the agenda? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of today's agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll consider that approved. Moving on to item number 4, which is approval of the November 9th TAC meeting minutes. Again, are there any additions, deletions, or edits? Anyone has noted for those minutes? All right, well, hearing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes as written. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, meeting minutes are approved. Moving on to item number 5, public comments. Stacy, I believe we had one comment from the member of the public.
Yes, that's correct. I'll go ahead and read that now. This comment is from Elizabeth Ledoux. She is a resident of the city of Fredericksburg. And she writes that she saw a Facebook post asking for thoughts on biking and walking trails in Fredericksburg. The federal Safe Routes to Schools program has federal money for building walking and biking trails to schools. I propose we use funds like these to build a bike trail that runs from Learning Lane, running north along Route 1, all the way to James Monroe High School, connecting all of our schools to the same new path and connecting to the VCR trail and the canal path. This would give a huge percentage of our school-age children access to a path route to every school in our district. Also, the large number of people walking along Route 1 would have a safe path to get to their destination, which I guess is to shopping. We next can address a safe path along Lafayette Boulevard for the same purpose. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public online who'd also wish to make comments at this time? All right, well, hearing none, I guess we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. And we'll move on to discussion items, starting with number 6A, which is the LRTP update. I guess, Rich, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rich Denbo. I'm with Cambridge Systematics. We are under an on-call task order with Fampo to help support the 2050 LRTP. I'm going to turn it over to Feng Liu, who's going to talk about a lot of the modeling issues and initial forecasts. But I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to work with Fampo. We look forward to working on this LRTP with you all over the next several months. And you'll probably be seeing myself and Feng at future meetings to give updates on modeling results. So thanks again, Feng. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rich. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to walk you through about the 50 baseline forecast for Fampo region. The forecast are currently based on socio-economic forecast for 2050 that were adopted by the policy committee on December 10th, 2018. The travel demand forecast are based on the socio-economic forecast using the latest Fampo travel demand model, version 5, that were developed by VDOT May 2020, with the base year 2017 and original horizon year 2045. For this effort of LRTP update, we extend the horizon year from 2045 to 2050. Next, please. So in terms of the socio-economic growth in the region, this is a slide to show you the percentage growth for population and employment by jurisdiction and the region as a whole. As you can see, between 2017 and 2050, the growth will be significant, for the region as a whole, as well as for jurisdictions in terms of percentage growth. It's about 70% growth for the region as a whole, a little bit more than 70% for employment and the population as well. Next, please. So this slide shows you the absolute value of the socioeconomic growth in terms of population and employment. Two local jurisdictions have much higher growth in terms of absolute values for population and employment growth as well. Next, please.
Hey, Feng, this is Paul Aniello from Spotsylvania County. I just want to make a point about the employment growth.
Yeah.
So it seems to us that the employment growth for Spotsylvania is lower than it should be. I know, like on the next slide, that will kind of indicate this, but there's a lot of growth planned around exit 126 and exit 118, and particularly with exit 126, there's a VA healthcare clinic going in there. Basically, that's 500,000 square feet, and all sorts of other businesses, and basically kind of on the map showing the growth, it shows kind of no growth in that area whatsoever between 2017 and 2050.
Okay. Yeah, definitely we want to check with you. We'll follow up with you on that. We'll share the data by TAZ with you so that we can make sure that we get the numbers right.
Great.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, this map shows you the distribution of growth for population, as well as the base year 2017 distribution of population at the TAZ level, transportation analysis zone level. So the the red colors show the highest category of growth. The green, the light green are the lowest ones. You can see, the growth is around I-95 corridor for Stafford County, and of course we will check with Paul for Spotsylvania County about the growth to make sure that they are reflecting the current forecast.
Feng, this is Jason from Stafford.
Yeah.
I guess just along a similar vein, I'm not sure, have you all, and Stafford's getting ready to update our comprehensive plan, I think, again here, but have you all picked up on the new projects proposed in Stafford around the Centerport area and around our Courthouse Road area? We have some significant projects that have recently come on to the scene that we're going to expect a lot of growth around those areas.
We did not go through specific projects for this effort, but of course we want to follow up with you guys as well to make sure that this would reflect the latest planning assumptions for the future growth. This is simply extension of previous 2045 forecast at the TAZ level, but at county level, the forecasts are total controls that were adopted by the policy committee 2 years ago. So that's the current the data set we're using right now for this mapping.
Okay. Yeah, we could follow up. That'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks for the comment. Next, please. So this one is to show you the employment, the growth, and the base year conditions at the TAZ level again. So the in a similar color scheme to represent the highest growth with red and orange and light green lowest category of employment for the base year, as well as for growth increments between 2017 and 2050. Similar growth trend along I-95 corridor for employment. Next, please. So we put those socioeconomic growth at TSZ level into the model and run the model with other input files. So we got the trip productions for different trip purposes. This map is to show you the work trips and its distribution in the base year 2017 and a horizon year 2050. So the pattern of the work trip productions are pretty similar to what we see for the socioeconomic growth in terms of population. So you see a lot of growth between 2017 and 2050 along I-95 corridor. That's the reflecting what the drivers for work trips, which are mainly the population and its growth into the horizon year 2050. Next, please. So we look at the changes of the congestion level. This is a measure of congestion for the base year 2017 and 2050. It is categorized as free flow, moderate congestion, and severe congestion. For the base year in 2050, you see some increase in the congestion level along I-95 corridor. That is consistent with the growth along I-95 corridor. Next, please. In terms of the total growth for the region, we take a look at the population growth, as we said before, more than 70%, employment more than 70%. The trips are in the 60% range, as well as VMT, local VMTs, excluding those along freeways. Freeways has some through traffic that may dilute the growth, but for this comparison purpose, looks like they are in line with our expectation in terms of the traffic impacts of the socioeconomic growth in the future year 2050. So with that, I would like to have any question if you have at this point. So as I said, we're going to share our socioeconomic forecast for 2050 with jurisdictions to make sure that we are using the latest planning assumptions for the travel demand forecast for the region. So that's what I have today. Thank you all.
All right, Rich and Feng, thank you very much. That's some very interesting information and certainly showing a huge amount of growth coming to our area in the next couple decades here.
Alex, are you ready to move on to the next item?
Sorry about that. Yes, please proceed.
Okay, so if you all recall, Fampo staff began early public outreach to gather public feedback on developing the 2050 Lrtp's goals and objectives. And so I have for you today the preliminary results as the survey just closed Friday night. Of course, this week and next week, we'll be working on gathering the final results, and we'll be presenting that to you later, I guess, in February. So let's start with the purpose of the early outreach. It was to teach the public about the long-range plan, to provide an opportunity for the public to participate in the planning process, to develop the region's goals and objectives, to provide planners and decision makers with useful public input as we develop the long-term goals and objectives for the region. And also, we specifically wanted to be proactive and reach out to traditionally underserved groups. Next slide, please. So overview of the early outreach efforts. Time frame was November through December. It just ended December 31st. And for the online survey design, we worked with TAC and CTAC members to develop an online survey that would provide useful public feedback to Fampo staff as well as TAC and policy. We distributed the survey information through a press release. It was picked up in a news article by Fredericksburg.today, which is an online news site. Also, the VRE picked it up and included it in their Rider newsletter and also published that on their website. We created a web page with informational videos, and there's a link there if later you want to view that. We worked with some of our planners to create videos that would convey in simple terms what the long-range plan is and the importance in participating in the process. Of course, we also distributed news on the survey through social media ads and posts, and we thank our localities and other partners for helping us share that news. We sent a mass email out as well as a reminder email. We also distributed flyers at the libraries, breweries, and the cafes. And I had to follow up with Jamie Jackson to confirm this, but we were in the works to advertise on the Fred buses. We also did public outreach at the Fred station. I'll give you some more information on that as we progress through the slides. And we also worked with Tamara Banks. She's the Healthy Generations Fred travel trainer, and she invited us to do a Facebook Live to provide the public with some more information. Next slide, please. Okay, so the initial survey participation, now this was gathered 10 days before the survey closed so that we could have this information ready to go out in the TAC packet. At that time, we had 594 surveys. We have had people participate in the survey since then. Of those who actually clicked on and opened the survey, 35% either partially or completely answered survey questions. Now that might seem a little low, but it actually, with the subject matter, I'm pretty pleased with those results. So we've had 209 partial or complete responses. This is particularly a good sign because the survey was longer than a typical survey. Normally, the public will engage if it's 5 minutes or less. This survey clearly stated on the opening page that it could take up to 10 minutes. So it's no wonder some people said, I don't have 10 minutes to spend on this. So I'm pretty happy with those results. And then 61% of those who took the survey completed it fully. And they really gave us in-depth feedback. You can see there that they took over 12 minutes of their time to really craft some great written comments as well as answer all of the multiple choice questions. The initial survey results, 10 days before the close of the survey, we had 308 written comments. So we're going to really have to spend some time digesting those and reporting on those in a way that you all don't have to spend a large amount of time reading through each and every single one. The public was also asked the last question on the survey about their satisfaction with their ability to participate in the planning process through the survey. We had high satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 5. 72% of those who answered rated it 4 or 5 stars. So they were really pleased with their ability to participate. We also collected socioeconomic and demographic information, which will help document our Title VI efforts. And then really impressively, 71% of the participants gave their contact information and asked to be included in the future public involvement activities. Next slide, please. This is some information on the in-person outreach at the Fred station. You can see in the image there, if you're looking at your screen, that we did proper social distancing. The first day it was just Fampo staff. The second day, as the picture shows, we had Tamara Banks, who is again the HGAAA's Fred travel trainer. She helped promote the event on Facebook Live as she was there, and she also gave out some information on Fred. Fred riders really recognize her because she's riding the buses almost daily with them. So she was a great resource to have. People came up to the table specifically to say, hey, I know you. So we thank her for her participation. It was an outdoor tabling event. We reached about 48 people. We gave out snacks and water bottles that had stickers on them with QR codes and online links for them to later go and answer the survey. We also distributed paper copies. However, paper doesn't seem to be too popular at these kinds of events. People don't want to carry around paper with them. We provided the survey in English as well as Spanish. Next slide, please. Just some photos seeing our table set up there. You can see the labels on all the snacks. Next slide, please. So the next steps, as I said, the final survey results will come to you all. We will have them by mid-January, or that's what I'm expecting anyways, and present them at the February TAC meeting. We are seeking your feedback after you review the report to let us know if the information is useful to you, if it's presented in a manner that you are easily able to ascertain what the public wants for the goals and objectives. And we are going to be using the public feedback as we draft the 2050 Lrtp's goals and objectives section. And then after we're done with that, we'll be turning our attention to the second phase of public involvement efforts regarding the 2050 Lrtp, and that will be targeted to gathering public feedback on the draft project list. I believe that's the last slide. Yes. Any questions?
Hey, Stacy, it's Jason. I was just curious, yeah, because I did notice the survey was a little bit long. I was wondering maybe if it made sense. Were there anything specific from this that we need to go back and do some targeted surveys on so far, or have we gotten that far yet?
I have not gotten that far. To be honest, I'm a little overwhelmed with the written comments that we received. One thing to note, I don't think we necessarily have to follow up on it, but just something to be mindful of. We had a significant amount of comments, just doing a quick scan of them, regarding concerns with regional cooperations among elected officials. So that's something that we want to be mindful of going forward and really encourage that regional cooperation.
Stacy, Stephen Haynes, Mr. Stephen Haynes typed in the chat around 9:54 this morning. He was asking about Prince William's inclusion on all of the maps. Why that was.
Oh,
Hey,
I
Stacy,
think that's
this is
a
Adam.
question for the previous presenter, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that might be a question for Cambridge. I'm not sure if Rich or Fong are still on the line. Fong, are you still on audio by chance?
Fong may have left. Adam, this is Rich. Fong.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the maps showing here include a portion of Prince William County because that's part of the modern domain to better represent interactions between Prince William County and the Fampo region. So even though it's not part of the Fampo region, it is part of the modern domain. I hope that answered the question. If any, if you need any further clarification.
So what you're saying is it was just to include some additional information that would help the model function more properly. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
This is Kate. I just want to say I think Stacy did an excellent job. So good job, Stacy, on this effort. I love to see how much outreach we were able to do on this so far. So thank you.
Great, Mr. Chair, if I could, I'll go ahead and jump into the next update regarding the 2050 LRTP here. So just a couple updates from me as well as Ian. I'll hand it off to him here in just a second, but wanted to talk a little bit about the goals and objectives that Stacy mentioned and how the survey is going to impact next steps, talk a little bit about project lists, and then hand it over to Ian to talk about some of the work that we're doing with scenario planning. So on the goals and objectives, this is sort of a segue from Stacy's last slide. So that survey, of course, as she mentioned, closed on December 31st. So this month, we're going to be taking that information and reworking some of the language for the goals and objectives to bring back to the committees next month. So we wanted to make sure that what we have in the LRTP is reflective of the region as a whole and not just what the planning requirements are. So we will have those for all three committees for review next month. And then a couple notes on the LRTP project list. So of course, we did have the 2045 LRTP amendment that was approved in July of 2020. So the universe of projects right now in our constrained list is recent. We did have, of course, the call for projects as part of the 2050 LRTP effort in late 2019 that was put on hold. That will resume here in early 2021. We're sort of working on those dates right now. And then a couple notes on project prioritization. So we are working on a couple updates that we'll bring back in full next month to the TAC as far as some updates that we're making to the highway project prioritization methodology. And then, of course, we at Fampo do not have a explicit methodology for bike ped projects, transit, or PE studies. So we're going to develop some type of baseline framework for those project types as we move forward.
This is Paul, I don't actually think that that's correct. We can talk offline.
Okay, we can do that. And then the last note here is that we will be requesting forecasted revenues from transit providers and localities. We actually happened to get those from VDOT this morning. So Stephen, thank you for that email. And then with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Ian.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Adam, for that. And yes, Paul, if you have some information on that scoring or prioritization for those other items, we'd love to see that. We just don't have any record at the moment at the office of it. So in terms of the structure of the 2050 update, we're going to keep it pretty much the same as 2045, looking at an overview of the region and the demographic trends. Cambridge Systematics is helping us with some of that, as you've just seen in the earlier presentation. And looking at the future trends, there are two kinds of work that we are doing. Cambridge Systematics is modeling, as you know, the base year, which you've just seen, the horizon year, and no build scenarios, and they'll be giving you some updates as we go through this process. We're also working with VDOT's modeling team to model some alternative growth scenarios. Chapter 4, which deals with scenario planning in the 2045 Lrtp, and needs some updating, and we're working with the team at VDOT, and we have a meeting with them, I believe it's next week, to lay out exactly what they're going to be able to do for us. We don't have modeling capabilities in-house, and so we're using these two teams to be able to do the work that we need done. And we're looking through that work at the existing transportation plan, the regional needs plan, and the fiscally constrained plan. We're going to call for numbers on the financial constraints in the near term. Adam's already begun working on that. Next slide, or is that the last slide of our?
That's the last one. We're happy to take any questions from the group.
Yeah.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul. With regards to the request for financial information to the localities, when exactly do you think that request will come out?
Paul, I'm thinking at some point, probably within the next week or two, so that we can start to put those numbers together next month.
What? Sorry, this is Jason. What's the overall kind of timeline moving forward?
So this is Ian. The timeline that was laid out before I arrived here is pretty much to complete the Lrtp by the end of 2021. So I know that quite a bunch of work has been done before I arrived, and we are currently working on Chapter 4 and the items involved with modeling, the financial constraints, and then we're going to call for projects once we've done some amendments to Chapter 4. Those projects then have to be modeled in the 2050 horizon, and that's going to lead to developing the rest of the Lrtp update. So we're at the moment still looking at completing the process by the end of the year. If we need to change that because of any unforeseen circumstances, we'll obviously come back to the TAC to just discuss what that is. But we don't foresee any major changes to the timeline that was published before I arrived. I don't know if Adam wants to comment on the original timeline.
I think that sums it up. We have December 2021 targeted. Of course, Fampo committees don't meet in December, so that may be January of 2022.
We're not under any pressure, however. We only, in terms of regulations, I believe we only have to complete it by 2023. So we're under no particular pressure to do it, but we have set ourselves roughly the end of the year as the time we want to complete the project.
That's helpful. I kind of mentioned this earlier. I know on Stafford's end, we're looking at possibly some significant changes in the comprehensive plan. Of course, from any year to given year that could happen with any board, I guess. But there seems to be a particular focus on making some changes right now that may result in some long-term growth pattern differences. The other thing, I think I kind of mentioned this maybe a month or so ago when we met Ian, was we're getting ready to start a modeling and master plan process on our half, and there may be some opportunities for us to share some data and information from our end. I don't know if there's some opportunities there to help, partner in some things. Obviously, you guys have a lot on your plate. I was just thinking in terms of timing that there might be some things there for us just to keep an eye on with if we make some large changes on our end to the to the comp plan, that's stuff that we're just going to want to make sure that you guys are aware of.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrea. We're very keen to see what you guys have planned and the other jurisdictions. Some people, well, some of our jurisdictions have already completed their comprehensive plan update, and some have just begun. So, you know, the timing is a little bit of a hash, but we would certainly like to see what changes you guys have planned, because I'd like to incorporate that into that chapter 4 that deals with scenarios and scenario planning. I've particularly been asking the jurisdictions to look at where geographically they expect the residential growth and also the jobs growth to occur at a more granular level than was done in the 2045 update, because that will give us a little bit more of an indication of where particularly there are going to be challenges on the transportation network. In terms of where additional congestion might occur at a slightly more granular level than we've looked at before. But that means we have to be able to anticipate where we expect the residential growth and densification to occur, and also the jobs to occur. And that goes to Paul's comment also about the additional developments that he's anticipating in Spotsylvania. We want to put those things on a map so that we can feed that into the modeling process, and that would be very helpful to get from all the jurisdictions. I'm planning to send out correspondence this week to our different jurisdictions, asking them for that kind of information, and allocating a point person here at Fampo that you can send all the maps or data that you're using to, so that we can include it in this 2050 update. Very excited to do that, because I think it will add value to the plan, that it's not just a box ticking exercise, but we actually paid some attention to specific local changes that we expect to see on the ground and how those are going to affect things like traffic. So thanks for that. I really appreciate that kind of input and that kind of data and information sharing across the region. We can certainly build a much more robust transportation system if we know exactly where things are going to occur, or at least we can anticipate them. I mean, you know, 2050 is quite a long time in the future, but at least we can get our best guess as to where it's going to happen based on the availability of bulk infrastructure services like water, electricity, sewer, and also the zoning that has been approved or that is likely to be approved in the future. And that guides kind of where the development can and will occur. So thanks for that.
Yeah, ideally, you know, I just want to make sure that at the end of this, and I know that VDOT will be included on this too, but that our organization and you all and VDOT are headed in the same direction in terms of the, you know, any kind of large scale transportation projects, at least in Stafford's end. I'm sure the other municipalities have the same thoughts. But yeah, okay, great, thanks.
Absolutely.
All right, well, if there's no other questions or comments regarding that, we'll move on to item 6B, which is the Cmac and STBG prioritization methodology update. I'll go ahead and give just a quick update and then pass it over to Adam. As you all recall, probably back in, I think in November, we kind of formed a subcommittee to look at updating the STBG prioritization methodology to include, you know, an additional ranking factor kind of based on providing a benefit to the North Stafford TMA, which would kind of be in accordance with the MOA that's been going around between Fampo and the Washington TPB. The subcommittee, you know, we looked at the 6 main project types for scoring, such as the intermodal, roadway, transit, things like that. Right off the bat, we kind of determined some of these project types, such as intermodal and transit, are already kind of, you know, regional in nature and provide a benefit throughout the region and really wouldn't be subjected to this additional scoring criteria for the North Stafford TMA area. However, we did identify some additional scoring metrics for roadway projects, you know, some ITS signal projects, planning studies, and non-motorized projects. And so with that, I'd like to turn over Adam to kind of run through the presentation on the scoring methodology updates and then review the proposed changes to the methodology. So Adam?
Great, thank you, Alex, appreciate that. So as he mentioned, the Cmac and STBG subcommittee met 3 times over the month of December to sort of go through and sort of work out some updates that would have a quantitative and objective measure to see how a project might directly benefit the TMA area. So the first iteration of proposals were put before the Cmac and STBG subcommittee before eventually going to all 3 of our committees this month. We do have sort of a draft schedule laid out here and did receive word from VDOT last week that this would work with their schedule and getting everything to the CTB by June. So the plan for this month is to present this again to all 3 committees and ask for feedback and ask for approval next month. So for those not quite as familiar, this is for the North Stafford TMA area, which you can see on the map to the right. So any projects that are sort of within that area or projects that would benefit that area was sort of the goal of this update. As Alex mentioned, we do have 6 different project types in the existing methodology. So we looked at a way to see if each of these project types could have a way of measuring that direct benefit to that geographic area. So what we did is we developed kind of a 2-tiered approach. So we said that if a project type has a way of measuring that direct benefit to the TMA, we would go ahead and take the existing scoring metrics and make that 90% of a project score, and then have an additional up to 10 points to measure that direct benefit. If a project is not feasible for measuring benefit to the TMA, then we would leave it as is. So we're not making any changes in that regard. So this is a quick summary that Alex touched on a little bit. So again, the first step was, is it feasible to measure direct benefit to the TMA? And then if so, what is the measure, the threshold, and then the scoring, of course, for doing so. So briefly, before I turn it over to Matthew and Jordan to talk through some of the specifics for these different types, we said that for roadway capacity and paving projects, it is feasible. That's an ITS, an operational improvement that is location specific, like in the adaptive signal control projects. That would also be eligible. Anything for freight or transit, we said is not feasible because it's a region-wide benefit. And then for planning and PE, we said yes, as well as for non-motorized, which is bike ped projects. We said that it would be feasible, again, for measuring that direct benefit. So we did pull a number of sample projects for this, some that are on the existing Cmac and STBG list. We also pulled some hypothetical projects for a larger sample size for the roadway category. And then again, the intention here is to utilize the benefit to the TMA metric for projects for STBG funding only, not Cmac. So did want to make that point of clarification. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matthew to talk through the roadway projects, and then Jordan will talk about the other types here in just a minute.
All right, thank you, Adam. So here we have the roadway projects. So to start, we tested 6 projects, 2 in each locality, and these are current and former projects that have funding and were previously scored. You can see the table on the left shows those projects, and then the map on the right shows their specific locations. Next slide. So to do a benefit to the TMA analysis, we looked at a platform called Streetlight Data. It is an on-demand mobility analytics platform. They basically take big data from mobile devices and create OD, or origin destination matrices, travel time, and select link studies. And then via the Streetlight platform, we can basically view the volume of trips over different periods of time, differences by day type, day part, data period, and so on. And we can basically see in this instance where people are going to and from certain locations, and an idea of how many are going to and from certain locations. Next slide. So for the roadway capacity projects, reviewing the proposed projects to determine over an average week, for example, or an average day, how many vehicle trips start or end in the TMA polygon, and then score the project based on the total trip volume. So to complete an origin destination analysis twice. So analysis A would be the project segment, so where the project is located, to the Stafford TMA. And analysis B would be the Stafford TMA to the project segment. And the output would just be the streetlight volume. A plus B would be the total, and that would be the score. But that would be how it is scored. And then volume in this analysis is defined as an output for measuring the daily average volume of vehicle trips in a particular area in a given period of time. Next slide. So the first project here, Route 3 Stars Study and I-95 off-ramp improvements. The image on the left is the polygon in the streetlight portal for analyzing this data. Next slide. And the same thing, Lafayette Boulevard improvements, Lafayette Boulevard roundabout improvements, and the polygon on the left, or the right, sorry, is the streetlight data polygon. Next slide. Route 28 Lafayette Boulevard and Route 1 improvements. You can see the image on the right showing the polygon and the streetlight platform. Next slide. Route 1 and Market Street turn lane improvements. The image on the right showing the polygon for our analysis. Next slide. Route 1 and Enon Road intersection improvements. Again, the polygon on the right showing where our analysis takes place. Next slide. And then Route 1 and Telegraph Road improvements and Woodstock Lane intersection improvements. So for this specific project, it's actually a really good case study because we're looking at both two different locations along Route 1 in or going to the Stafford TMA. Next slide. So in doing this analysis, each project can be scored based on its streetlight volume in relation to the TMA. As an example, if it has less than 1,000 streetlight volume to and from the TMA, it would get 1 point, 1,000 to 5,000, 2 points, 5,000 to 10,000, 3 points, 10,000 to 20,000, 6 points, and anything greater than 20,000 gets a full score of 10 out of 10 points. Next slide. So to complete this analysis, get basically a so-called 90% score. So multiply the original total project score by 90%. So say a project has a score of 80 out of 100, it would move to a 72 out of 100. And for the benefit TMA, if applicable, it would get up to 10 points. So if a project receives a 6 out of 10 in the benefit of the TMA analysis, and its 90% score was a 72, it would be 72 plus 6 out of 78. So a project would receive now, instead of an 80 out of 100, a 78 out of 100. And this is just one example. In other cases, it can go from an 80 out of 100 to an 82 out of 100. So depending on the project's benefit, it can score worse or better. Next slide. So the TMA benefit, 10% of the total score, the proposed percentage. We can see the scores here. So the original score in the first column for each of the projects, the original score times 90%, basically taking that 10% of the total score. And then the original rank, so the rank of all of these projects in terms of how they scored against each other. So, of course, the best project would be the Route 208 Lafayette Boulevard and Route 1 improvements. That's the one that scored the best. And then the TMA score, so based on their scored values, streetlight volume. And then the final score when you add both the original 90% score plus the TMA score. So, for instance, the Route 3 Stars Study and I-95 off-ramp improvements, original score times 90% is 72. The final score would be 74. And another example, Route 28 Lafayette Boulevard and Route 1 improvements. The original score before 90% was 93. The score when you had the 90% is 83.7. And then the final score would be an 85.7. And then lastly, another example being Route 1 and Telegraph Road / Woodstock improvements. The original score is an 80. The 90% score is a 72. And the final score would be an 82. So that project actually moved up 2 points because, well, it is in the TMA actually. So, and again, the final column there is just the final rank, so their rankings against each other. So you can kind of use that to determine how projects may have changed. Next slide. And then lastly, we did kind of a second analysis. We added a bunch of different projects, so 6 more projects to generate a larger sample size for roadway projects. And these were hypothetical projects in various locations throughout the region. They covered areas that were not covered by the previous project selected. So for instance, we basically have covered the city of Fredericksburg with the first 2 projects. So we didn't add any in the city, but we added projects in places like off along Route 17, Spotsylvania Courthouse, Lake Anna, Route 2, Route 17, and so on. And then you can see again on the left here, this one actually shows the streetlight volume, A, B, and then A plus B, and then their benefit to the TMA score. So basically how well each of these projects would score with their streetlight volume. And then again, the map on the right is just showing those projects, but also in the graduated symbols, graduated colors, we can see basically the darker shades of blue are the projects that scored the best, with the benefit of the TMA score, and the lighter shades of blue are the projects that did not score as well. Thank you, and I'll pass it off to Jordan.
Thank you, Matt and Adam. So I just want to first start off by saying we don't have a slide for the ITS and operational, but that is going to be scored based on the same methodology that the roadway projects are. And that, again, is based for only location projects, something like adaptive signal controllers, and that will be just location. So then moving on to transit, which you see on this slide, working with the Cmac SCBG subcommittee group, we found that it's not feasible to measure these projects because either these projects provide region-wide benefit to the TMA, or there's no simple and objective way to measure the actual benefit for these transit and TDM projects. So all 4 of these subcategories in this group will not be measured against the TMA benefit, meaning that the original score will just be used as the score for ranking. And then the next slide is PE and studies. So these are some sample projects, one from each locality. We can move to the next slide. And these next 3 slides just show the general location of where these projects would be. And so for the transit, or for the PE planning and studies, excuse me, we are looked at these 3 projects to determine where their location is based off the TMA. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that we used a buffered distance of 3 miles, and we added 3-mile increments all throughout the region. So based on the location to the TMA, if it's within 3 miles of the TMA, or actually inside of the TMA, the project would receive a 10 out of 10 score. And for every additional 3 miles from the original 3 miles at the 10 score, you would decrease 1 point. And so to measure this, we'd measure the closest part of the project depending on which band that the project would fall in. And if a project partially falls into 2 different categories, it will just receive points for the highest points. So if it's within 9 and 10 miles, it would just receive 8 points because it has the higher category of the 9 miles. And then you can go to the next slide. And this again is a sample of how these projects would be scored. So say the original project has 50 points, it would be multiplied by 90% and given a score of 45 points. And then we would add up to 10 possible points based on the location. So in this case, for example, it receives 6 points out of 10, and you'd add 45 plus 6 to get 51, and then the project's final score would be 51 out of 100. And then this is the last slide. Again, similar to the roadway, it has the original score times 90%, the original rank, the TMA benefit score measure, the final score, and then the ranking. And then the next category is non-motorized, also known as bike and pedestrian. We have 2 projects here. And then the next 2 slides are just the locations of where these projects are. And then for these ones, we looked to see if the project was in 0.7 or 0.75 miles or 3/4 of a mile from the TMA or within the TMA. And this distance was chosen because of the Americans with Disabilities ADA paratransit distance is 3/4 of a mile. And so if we look, neither of those projects are located within 3/4 of a mile. So we wouldn't give either of them any points, but if it was within, they would get 10 out of 10. And then the last slide shows what the scoring would look like. Again, with the original score, the 90% score, the original ranking, if it has any points for the TMA, and then the final score and rank. And then on the last slide, before we have any feedback of the original questions or initial questions, we wanted to let you know that if you have any questions after these presentation or after the meeting, we'd like to have any comments or feedback this month, and then we will seek approval of these methodologies in next month's TAC meeting. I can turn it over to the group for any questions that they have.
This is Michelle from VDOT. I appreciate the the work that the subcommittee did. I think it has been very thorough on this topic. I have a couple questions, if I may. The bike and ped measure that you guys came up with, did we consider maybe doing something graduated like you did for the other measures that wasn't a either total 10-point or 0? I know that one might be a little harder, but that one seems like an all or nothing measure there.
Yeah, we originally had a 1 mile buffer, just saying that it would be likely that someone could walk a mile, but then there was also feedback about what if somebody would bike 3 to 4 miles on average. There was a lot of information about how far people would go to access a transit stop, but not a lot of information about how far people would go to access a new amenity, such as a path or a trail. So we kind of had the idea of, well, maybe we do a 1 mile for walking and a 3 or 4 mile for biking. But we brought that back to the committee, and they suggested that using this 3/4 of a mile would be appropriate, since it was part of a federal regulation and it was less abstract than some of the other mileage that was chosen.
No, I understand that the 3/4 of the mile limit based on ADA requirements. I was just talking about the I guess the point values that will be assigned to the scoring. Either the 0 points or the 10, I guess, if that's my understanding of how you're going to assign the points.
Yeah, so if it's
scores.
I was just going to say, if it's within that point 3/4 of a mile or 0.75 or within the TMA, it would automatically get the 10 out of 10. But if it's further than that, it wouldn't get any points. But again, if it's partially within, so part of the improvement is within that buffer distance, then it would get the 10 out of 10. But if it's not partially within it, then it wouldn't get any of those points.
Okay. Next question, and this maybe goes to the whole group that worked on this. I did not notice in the document, and maybe I missed it, but were there any updates to some of the process and procedure? And I know that that's been talked about a little bit as a group. Like, are we going to include in there what our protocols are for like call for projects? I know that's come up in the past, or if we have an out of cycle. I know that has come up a lot this past year with what is our normal process and procedure at the MPO, or was that just not something that we got around to this round? Or
Hey, this is Alex. I'll answer that, Michelle. It's certainly something I think initially we had looked at is kind of doing a whole revamp of the entire prioritization methodology for both Cmac and STBG. And I think once we started digging into it, we realized it was just a monumental effort. And just between the subcommittee and Fampo staff, we just didn't have the resources necessary to make that kind of a massive overhaul in the time given. And honestly, with the things that have been going on policy committee, we kind of wanted to keep it kind of short and simple in hopes that we could get this through approval from policy committee. I think we're looking at possibly doing a larger overhaul of the prioritization methodology, once we kind of solidify the process for the LRTP.
This is Jason. Hey, can I, to Michelle's point, would it be helpful? I'll just be blunt. I don't really know all the timelines for the prioritization process a lot of times. Would it be helpful if we just made sure that we got that information out to everybody so that, everybody's really clear on what that process is and timelines and expectations? Because I think what Michelle's pointing out is that sometimes, especially this past year, it got a little wonky at times.
Hey, this is Paul. So kind of historically, the time that Fampo did this was kind of the late winter or early spring, and certainly that is a kind of a normal time that could continue in the future. I'll say with Smart Scale, my perspective is that's changed things kind of the last 4 or 5 years, and one of the issues with Smart Scale is basically money will be put on projects, but there's no guarantee that those projects are selected. Sometimes those projects are not selected in Smart Scale, so then there's a situation where there's a bunch of Cmac or STBG funding sitting on projects not being used, and that necessitates some adjustments and changes which can happen out of cycle. So, I mean, my perspective is I think there should be the flexibility to do both. You have a regular call for projects, but then if there's a bunch of funding available, like there's 3 million that the region has available, there should be kind of a protocol just to be able to allocate that.
Yeah, this is Jason again. I don't disagree. Certainly the policy committee should have the ability to adjust to projects that do or don't score well with smart scale, let's say, or other changes at a state or federal level. You know, this past year was a good example of that for sure. But I do think it'd be helpful if, at least for me, and maybe I'm the only one here, but if we had a quick outline of what the timeline will be for this year and moving forward for the typical, and then maybe to Michelle's point, you know, is there a way that the policy committee, is there a formal process for them to initiate an off cycle, if you will, call for projects? Like, what is that? And because that's kind of, I think, a big issue we ran into.
Yeah, and not to interrupt you, Jason, I'm sorry about that, but and your process doesn't have to be a what I was asking about doesn't have to be a, you know, you do this at January or February each year, even though that, as Paul mentioned, that historically has been how Fampo has operated. It can just be your process is that you announce a call for project, you know, on 1 month, and you take the projects in at your next meeting, or you allow so many days in between, and then it's presented to your policy committee, and then you approve. It can be something, you know, that vague in nature. It's just, I know it had come up a lot this past year, and if we were following our process that had been historical in the past. And then my last question was, have we engaged the FHWA at all on any of these updates? Or was this presentation today just, and putting this on the agenda, our way of how we were going to get this out to them to see if they had any comments?
Hey, this is Alex again. Michelle, you hit it right on the head. This was just kind of our introduction to both the full TAC committee. We'd like to present it to CTAC, policy committee, and FHWA.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Good morning, this is Jamie. I just had a quick question regarding the transit piece, and this may be an offline conversation. Even though I understand that as far as the TMA, we aren't being evaluated against that schedule, but how does transit stack up with other projects? Because that was one of the pieces that we had discussed, and I wasn't on the smaller subcommittee, but I still don't understand fully how we can actually rank to actually be considered for a project. And have you kind of run the numbers on any of the older projects to see where all of these projects would stack up under the new process?
I can answer that, and then Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the goal of this scoring is that each specific project type will be scored against projects within that category. So roadway capacity will only be scored against roadway capacity and ranked against those projects. So transit would not be compared to ITS or operational, or it wouldn't be compared to non-motorized.
Okay, and that makes sense to me because that's what I've experienced at other MPOs, but then does that mean that you're doing a transit set aside for funding, which HRTPO does do?
I'll take that one, Jordan. So there's not necessarily, Jamie, a set aside for funding. I mean, it's competing for the same dollars. I'll say though that with transit, that would be more likely, I suppose, to be Cmac funding than STBG. So these updates related to the TMA are specific only to the STBG funding pot. But in theory, that is how we would present the scores. The scores in one category should be considered against the other scores in that category, not from one to the other.
Okay, well, I would just ask whether it's the committee or the regional body to evaluate literally what that actually looks like on paper, because if you're comparing it or utilizing the methodology from, sister regional bodies, I believe that HRTPO, the Hampton Regional Planning Organization, they set aside for transit and I believe bike ped 20% of that Cmac funding and 20% of the RSTP funding actually. So what I forecast will happen if there is not some clarity to that piece is that the funding will be eaten away by road projects. So I do request some clarity on how you're actually going to implement it, because the conceptual idea is not going to actually pan out. We're just gonna, and this isn't just for transit, but for bike ped as well. We're in the Commonwealth, so we usually lose out to road projects. So just please consider that as an item I'm requesting to just provide some clarity to.
Chairman, I take your guidance, but can I suggest that we allow our staff to look at what's been done in the past in Fampo and also consider, as was suggested by Jamie, we look at other MPOs in Virginia and see what particular process they follow to allocate funding between these different modes, because I get the point. I mean, I take the point that if you're not comparing items within separate buckets, then how do you allocate to the different modes? And it seems to me that the system in the past has been quite complex, and I think perhaps we should provide a little clarity, but I'd like to do a little bit of homework on that and perhaps present an answer to that question at the next TAC meeting. It might be an incomplete answer, but at least I think we should put the items on the table, and then it can be discussed here if that's acceptable to the chairperson and the committee.
That certainly sounds good to me.
And this is Jamie again. I'm in agreement with that, and I also do want to echo Jason and Michelle's statements as well. I think that having some additional information on the process and timelines, and just having something, even if it does not have specific dates or months, because if not, as a committee, I think evaluating these projects as they come up is probably not the best idea. I think that we need to at least have some guidelines into what can be introduced and when it can be introduced. So for example, if you had a project that was ranked, and let's say out of 100 points, it got 20, to bring it to the committee off cycle probably does not make the best sense. But holding that funds or those potential funds in reserves until a project comes up that meets whatever the criteria is would probably be more beneficial for the region. But I do concur with Stafford and VDOT.
All right, well, thanks for those comments. I guess with that being said, Adam, would you like to run through kind of the draft changes we had for the prioritization methodology?
Sure, Alex would be happy to do that. So I've got two versions in the packet today. One has the track changes, and one is a clean version with all of the changes made. So we made a couple administrative updates, talked about the fact that different folks use RSTP versus STBG. We're using it pretty interchangeably with our committees. Updated the name of the TAC and its role sort of in the process here. So again, largely just sort of administrative updates for the first part of the document. And then once we get into the different project types, we basically spell out sort of this exercise we've gone through over the past month or so, as far as, again, a summary of what the benefit to the TMA measure looks like. And then with each category, just at the bottom, we sort of inserted a section that spells out how we're going to measure and score that benefit to the TMA. Again, all of this is reflected in the slides that we just went through, so I'm not going to go through these in too much detail, but again, that information is here in the packet.
All right, thanks, Adam. I think really what we're looking for is if each of the TAC members could go ahead and kind of look through those track changes document and provide us back with any kind of questions, comments, or issues you may have, so we can kind of compile those and bring those together and see what additional changes may be necessary.
When this is Jason. When do you need comments back by?
Hey, Jason, this is Adam. It would be, I think, helpful if we got comments back by, let's go ahead and say that the 20th of January. So that's about 2.5 weeks out. So we can include those when we present this to the policy committee, and then when we bring it back to the TAC next month.
Sounds good.
All right, well, if there's no other discussion regarding that, we can move on to item 6C, which is the performance-based planning and programming update. Adam?
All right, thank you, Alex. Just a couple quick updates here, and then we're also requesting action today on a few items related to performance-based planning and programming. So this is the letter, again, that we, I think, shared with the TAC in November as far as some of the upcoming deadlines and dates that we received from VDOT at the quarterly coordination meeting last fall. So we do have before you 3 action items. One is adding the PTASK to the FY21-24 tip. So we included the page in the tip. We don't have track changes here, but did just want to point out that we basically copied and pasted what was sent to us from VDOT as far as the language and the table for what we need to add for the PTASK requirement. So this would be added directly to our tip if approved by the committee. The second item is related to the highway safety target setting. So this is a letter template. This is very similar to what I believe Fampo submitted to the state in November of 2019. So this is sort of the next iteration of that. So we're intending to adopt the statewide target here for highway safety. And then also for bridge conditions, same thing. Again, we're looking to adopt the statewide target. So we're asking for the committee to approve submittal of those 2 letters and then approve the addition of this language and content to our FY21-24 tip. And I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Okay, this is Alex. Hearing no questions or further comments, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve all 3.
This is Paul. I make a second to that motion.
All right, is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next 6D, which is the Transportation Improvement Program updates. I guess, Jamie, if you want to start us off with Fred.
This is Aiden here. Looks like Jamie might have stepped out. We have 3 updates here to the tip. The first one here is for the TSP. We are looking to procure a consultant to help us complete that task. The other 2 you see here at the bottom are for the Motorola radio project you may have been hearing about, and then also the acquisition of parking lot adjacent to our facility here. And those are 3 updates that we have at this time.
All right, do anyone have any questions for Aiden? I just have one, I guess. Yeah, I see where you've identified local funding on all three of those line items. Do you have any more details of where that local funding is coming from?
Aiden, you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the local funding, when we do any of our projects, that would usually come from the jurisdictions. So when we ask for our annual allocation from the jurisdictions, that's how those projects are funded. I do want to kind of preface that with the conversations that we had before, and hopefully we'll be bringing it to GWRC or Fampo in the future. But all of those projects, I believe, will be eligible for that 5307 funding through PRTC. So if we're able to access some of that 2.28 million that's currently available, that local funding to the actual jurisdictions can be reduced.
All right, great. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that clarification. All right, if there's no further questions or comments, I guess we'll move on to item 7D2, which is the draft resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is the draft resolution for the rollover from the 2018 to 2021 TIP to the 21 to 24 TIP. So as of October in 2019, the statewide TIP went into a sort of lockdown phase where the local TIP was allowed to be updated, but the incorporation of those updates into the statewide TIP was on pause so that they could update and transition from one set of years to the next. As of October 2020, the FHWA and FTA approved the statewide TIP for 21 and 24. So VDOT requested for the entire state 3 rollover amendments, and each amendment consisted of different localities due to the mass number of projects that needed to be updated. And so we're part of rollover amendment 3 at the state level, and these are the UPCs that will be included in the amendment for our FY 21-24 TIP to remain in sync with the statewide TIP. And Adam can scroll through all of the UPCs that are listed in the third whereas are attached to the document.
And I'll jump in here, Mr. Chair, as well with one final note on this. So we do have this listed as a draft resolution. We do have a couple questions that we sent over to VDOT right before the holidays. Just wanted to iron out a few details before we put this forward for a vote to the committee.
This is Jason. I guess I'm not 100% sure what's happening. Can somebody maybe just describe a little bit more in depth what mechanically is happening? I understand being in sync with the statewide TIP. Maybe that's all this is, but
Yeah, Jason, this is Adam. I'll sort of chime in there and see if VDOT has any comments to add, but this is essentially looking to take actions that were made to projects in our 18 to 21 TIP and roll that information into our FY 21 to 24 TIP, which took effect on October 1st of 2020. So this is essentially looking to take actions that were already made and make those effective in the new TIP. And we had sent over a couple questions based on what we were expecting for a few of the project blocks and what the funding looked like. Just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page with the state before we roll that out for a vote.
Yeah, Jason, this is Paul. I just want to kind of add to what kind of Adam said. So say kind of the snapshot of the projects that were going into the FY 21 to 24 TIP. We're taking, I believe, in August of 2019. And kind of after that date, there were some new projects that came about, or just some changes with existing projects. And that's what's included in this rollover. And this is basically, as Adam said, is basically that FY 18 to 21 TIP being amended after that August 2019 date. So it's basically pulling those changes also into the new TIP.
Okay.
This is Kate. To Jason's point, I just wonder if there could be some language added to the resolution to kind of clarify what's happening and why, because for those of us who aren't thinking about this all the time, and I think for the policy committee as well, it might not be 100% clear that this is something that's already been voted on. It's just an administrative adjustment, basically.
Yeah, I agree. When they see rollover, they're gonna say, "What are we rolling?" They're gonna see dollars.
That's a good point, Jason. Yeah, Kate, to your point, yeah, we can add another whereas clause with some kind of layman's terms as to what's going on, much to what Paul just said, and hopefully that will spell it out a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, and I think if you can include in that whereas clause something to the effect that this has already been approved by the policy committee, now we're just, making an administrative adjustment to make sure that what they approved in the past is still relevant moving forward. I think that's the key piece, that this is not new information, it's just to carry it forward.
Right.
All right, well, thanks, Jordan. If there's no further comments or questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which is 6E, Resolution 21-15 for the I-95-395 Commuter Choice Program. I'm not sure how familiar most of you are with this program, but what it is this was came out of the whole I-395 and 95 hot lanes projects, where through this program now we're going to be investing a portion of the toll revenues connected from those hot lane facilities into transit and other multimodal transportation enhancements that benefit the toll road users. Proposed projects are supposed to maximize person throughput throughout the corridor by using multimodal improvements. Currently, the call for projects for round 2 of funding is open and applications are due January 29th. Stafford County we're partnering with OmniRide again to continue commuter bus service to both DC and the Pentagon from our Stafford Borough Park and Ride lot. I see where Spotsylvania is seeking funding for a commuter lot at Route 1 and Commonwealth Drive, and is also partnering with Fred to seek funding for a feeder bus from the Route 208 parking lot to the main Amtrak VRE station. And then lastly, it looks like Fred is also seeking funding for a transit multimodal facility and a park and ride lot. And so with that being said, I'd like to recommend sending Resolution 21-15 expressing our support for these projects to the policy committee for signature.
Hey, Alex, so this is Paul. I just had kind of one comment on the last whereas. I think it would be helpful, basically, if maybe there could be some clarification that these projects are consistent with the existing 2045 Fampo Lrtp.
Okay, yeah, I support that change.
That's the only comment I have. We support this.
Does anyone else have any comments regarding the proposal?
Hey, Alex, this is Adam. I just wanted to check and make sure I had the project titles right in here for each of the applicants. So if there's anything that needs to be changed, please let me know.
Okay, will do.
So yeah, Adam, all project titles look correct.
All right, well, hearing no more comments, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve Fampo Resolution 21-15 and send it to Policy Committee for execution.
Second from Spotsylvania.
All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thanks. Resolution passed, and we'll send it to Policy Committee for execution. All right, next will be item 6F is the 2045 LRTP amendment. Adam, you want to kick that off?
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Just a quick verbal update here to let the committee know that we will likely need to process a second 2045 LRTP amendment based on the timing that we're working with for the 2050 plan. This is likely due to the fact that VDOT may require projects that are slated to receive smart scale funding for round 4 to be in the CLRP prior to receiving that funding. So if that is the case, it'll be probably the April and May timeframe that we'll be rolling this out, as well as some other projects that may have accelerated schedules. So again, stay tuned on that front, and we will keep the committee posted on that. I did want to ask one question too of VDOT. Are there any pending TIP amendments that VDOT is aware of that might be rolled out in the next month or two?
Can you
Adam,
hear
I
me,
do
Ms.
not.
Michelle? I was gonna say, there's none that I am immediately aware of, but that doesn't mean there might not be something that comes up. We'll have to check.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Adam. All right, Leah, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and throwing up the 2021 Fampo meeting calendar.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, here's the draft meeting schedule for the 2021 calendar year. Localities have requested an update on this for the new year. You'll note the proposed rescheduled dates marked in vertical red lines due to holidays in July, September, and November. For your consideration in finalizing these meeting dates for TAC, all 3 rescheduled dates are 1 week rather than the usual 2 prior to policy committee meetings. July and November include a Wednesday CTAC meeting the same week. And finally, a vote is not required. However, meeting dates should be decided and confirmed for final publication. And then the next TAC meeting, of course, will be February 1st at 9:30 a.m. That is all, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks. Does anyone have any comments or issues regarding the 2021 calendar dates?
I'm just glad it's 2021. Not 20 anymore. That's all.
I think we all are glad it's 2021, and May, June, and July come quickly when the vaccines should take effect. The only thing is, as Leah pointed out, those 2 dates that where there's a holiday or a clash that need to be changed. Are we going to submit this to the policy committee to make those changes, or are we going to stick with it the way it is? Or is there any comment on those particular clash dates, the one where you see tentative reschedule?
This is Alex. I'm all in favor of rescheduling the dates to avoid the holidays.
This is Kate. I would just ask, does Fampo staff feel like that gives you enough time between the 2 meetings? I'm not sure what the other solution would be, but I agree that we need to work around holidays.
This is Paul. This is a minor comment, but I believe there's a new state holiday on June 18th.
Yeah, Paul, I think you are correct. I think that Juneteenth is going to be recognized on the 18th, that Friday. So I think that that's going to be the Friday prior, not on the policy committee meeting date, which is the 21st that month. But Kate, to your question, as far as the weeks where we've got a TAC meeting and a CTAC meeting, it's not ideal per se, but it's certainly workable for what we have laid out here.
Great.
All right, if there's no other comments regarding the proposed 2021 calendar. I guess we'll go ahead and move on to correspondence and then staff reports.
We don't have any correspondence, Mr. Chair, and I'll ask Ian if he has any staff reports he'd like to give.
Nothing that I particularly want to raise. I'm beginning with looking at a restructuring of our current staff complement. Only 2 changes currently to point out if anybody is particularly interested. The 2 part-time interns that were university students, we haven't renewed their contracts. And the second one, which is more importantly, I'm pleased to announce that we have appointed Matthew Lehay in a full-time capacity. Matthew was working for us on a temporary basis in a part-time capacity, and he's completed his master's degree at the end of last year. And we have, after a round of interviews for a full-time planner position, offered the position to Matthew, and I believe that he is accepting our offer. So we'd like to welcome Matthew to our full-time staff and offer a word of congratulations to him. Further than that, I'm going to continue working on a staff restructuring plan and more news to come in the future.
All right, great. Yeah, and congratulations, Matthew, on your new position. Although I imagine it'll be kind of much of the same of what you've already been doing.
Yeah, thank you. I expect it to be so.
All right, we'll move on to, I guess, the member reports. I'll start first with Stafford County. Not really much to report here yet, but as Jason mentioned, certainly glad to see 2020 in the rearview mirror and hoping 2021 brings some new changes and finally gets us out of this pandemic. And I'll pass it along to anyone else who has any member reports.
Good morning. This is Paul Agnello from Spotsylvania. I just want to say that we're kind of looking with anticipation on the results of Smart Scale Round 4, and assuming the results come out, I guess, at the CTB here in a couple weeks, we request that this be an agenda item at the next TAC meeting in February.
Hello, this is Bassam with the city. We have nothing to report.
Seattle Williams with DRPT. I just wanted to mention that our FY22 grant applications are open. They open December 1st and they will close on February 1st. So if you guys, if anybody doesn't have access to Olga, feel free to reach out to me or your project managers and we can get you access to that.
All right, are there any other members wishing to give a report? All right, well, hearing none, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn the Technical Advisory Committee and have our next meeting on February 1st.
Happy New Year to everybody and have a good one.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. We'll see you in February.
See you.